Hi and welcome to a brief tutorial on SAP Business Warehouse. In this tutorial, we'll be discussing about what SAP Business Warehouse is all about, why do organizations need Business Warehouse, and how we can go about designing in Business Warehouse. So let's get started. So SAP Business Warehouse has been around for 15 years now, and it has changed different versions. So as you can see in this slide here, it has various names over the years. It's been called Business Warehouse, which is BW, and then they renamed it to BIW, which is Business Information Warehouse, and then Business Intelligence, and then they switched it back again to Business Warehouse. So they're all the same, but they kept changing the names with the different versions. So it all started with version 1.x, and then 2.1c, 3.0b, 3.1c, 3.5, and then they renamed it to SAP NetWeaver from 7.0, and then these are the versions after 7.0. So until 3.x, they called it SAP BW, SAP Business Warehouse, or SAP Business Information Warehouse. With 7.0, they changed it to BI, which is Business Intelligence. And in 2008, SAP acquired Business Objects and they renamed it back to SAP Business Warehouse. And one more additional feature is from 7.3 and 7.4, SAP also started supporting SAP HANA, which is the database introduced by SAP. It is an in-memory database which is used for very fast retrieval of data during querying. So it started supporting SAP HANA from 7.3 and 7.4. So, what actually is business warehouse and why do we need it? So, as we all know that every business and every organization conducts a lot of business activities every day, and they create a lot of data. So, even if you go and buy something, everything is recorded, and that is all transaction data. Which customer bought what, and how many pieces at what date, what is the delivery date, and so on. So based on all that, there is data created. But that data is raw and it does not have any intelligence in it unless we transform it into some intelligent way. So what I mean is, if you have like thousands and millions of transactions, everyday transactions, which are at a very detailed level, there is no intelligence you can draw from it. But if you can put them in a multidimensional way and look at the total revenue for a particular customer, or what are the profits that you're getting from a particular vendor and things like that, you can actually, that is an intelligent information, and you can actually use that information to change your business activities so that you can get more profits and things like that. So in order to do that, SAP BW serves the purpose. So what we actually do in SAP Business Warehouse can be demonstrated by this figure here. So if you can see this figure here carefully, you can see that there are a lot of source systems here where my cursor is pointing. So there are non-SAP applications and SAP applications in an organization. So what does that mean? It means that, let's say, the sales systems are different and the purchasing systems are different, and a company has a different system for different application for finance. So what SAP Business Warehouse does is it collects data from all these different applications which an organization uses discretely, and then it brings all that data back into the business warehouse, where all the data is aggregated and combined in such a way that it provides a moment of truth, a moment of truth to any person in an organization. So if a data is there in a data warehouse, then that is the right data which we have to be looking for to to make any decisions. So if you actually look at the business warehouse server here, you see different objects like the PSA, which is the persistent staging area, and an ODS, and a cube here. So see, these are some of the objects we will be creating in this tutorial, but what we actually do is we take all this information from the source systems, which are basically flats, and we transform them into a multidimensional way, so we get a lot of, so we can do a lot of slicing and dicing of information to extract intelligence from them. So once we design these objects, we can write queries on them. We can slice and dice the information by writing queries on these multidimensional cubes and draw intelligent data from it. So based on all that we have discussed until now, there are three parts to SAP Business Warehouse. One is the extraction, the second one is the modeling, and the third one is the reporting. So the ETL tool is what we use to extract data from the source systems into the business warehouse. The data modeling is what we do in the enterprise data warehouse. And then we do reporting in a BEX tool called BEX Query Designer. So data modeling is done in an administrator workbench, which is called administrator workbench, which can be called by with the transaction called RSA1. Which this is very important because this is the transaction where you do most of your designing in. So ETL is extracting information from the SAP and non-SAP applications. And then we go to reporting BEX Query Designer, which is a tool on top of the warehouse, and we will be looking at the BEX Query Designer and be designing some basic queries in there, and we will be looking at the administrator workbench and the different features and functionalities of it. So before we get into that, I would like to basically share a concept of how data is stored in a business warehouse. So we use the concept called extended star schema to store data in a business warehouse. So what is it? So if you look at a diagram here, it's actually showing you an example of how data is stored. So if you can see the center table, it is called a fact table. So the fact table has, as you can see, it has CPT, sales organization, and you have the different number related items, which are revenue, discount, sales overhead, and non-cumulative value. So these are all numeric. If you can see, the right hand side of it are all numeric, and the CPT here are all dimension IDs. So if you can see, the C is a dimension ID which is linked to a dimension table. So the C is linked to a dimension table called customer, and there we have the different um, customer related information like the customer number, the chain, the branch, the head office. Okay, so that customer number here in the dimension table is again linked to a master data which is located outside of the fact table. So a fact table is nothing but a cube. So a fact table is nothing but a cube. So when you design a cube, all you have to do is you have to mention the dimensions and the key figures. The key figures are nothing but the number related values, and you have to design that. And even the customer dimension, whatever characteristics are nothing but examples are customer, the product, the material, all those things are characteristics. Key figures are anything which has a numeric value, which could be quantity or amount and things like that. So a fact table is a combination of dimension IDs and key figures, and the dimension IDs are linked to a dimension table which has all the characteristics which come under a dimension. Like for example, if it is a customer dimension, everything related to a customer in that fact table can be put under that dimension. And once we have the dimension laid out, those dimension tables are linked to master data which sits outside of the cube design. So there is master data for customer, which is who is the customer, what is his name, what is the location, what is the industry key for the customer. All this is master data which is stored outside of a cube. The only thing which is in the cube are the dimension IDs, and the dimension IDs have the different characteristics which are linked into a single dimension. So we will be seeing some examples in the actual system itself, but this is how data is designed in a warehouse, in a business warehouse. One other thing which is important to know is the difference between a master data and transaction data. So what is the difference between master data and transaction data? So master data is slow changing data. So this is the data which doesn't change very often. So if you say there is a customer, so his name, his telephone number, his address, and anything related to him does not change very often. But if he buys products with this organization, let's say I have a glass company and the customer is buying glass every other week or every week. So that is transaction data which is changing every day. So the information about, okay, the customer, let's say it's customer C1. So customer C1 has bought so many glass containers on so and so date for so and so price. So that is transaction data. But the information about the customer, so what is his name, what is his address, what is his ship to address, what is his bill to address, and all that information does not change very often. So these are two different kinds of data we deal with in business warehouse. So let's get into the system and have a look at the administrator workbench, which I was referring to initially, where we do most of the modeling. So as I have mentioned before, you go to RSA1 to get to that screen. But before we go there, I want to show you the screen we get to the moment we log in. So the moment I logged in through the SAP logon pad, so into my system, this is where I go to. So this is an SAP easy access menu from where you go to any other transaction screen you want to go. So as you can see, there are different folders here, one for modeling, one for administration, one for business explorer, and business planning and simulation. So all the transaction screens are in some of the folders here, in one of the folders here. And there is another folder called the favorites here. Um, and you can use this favorites folder to drag any of the transactions you use in this menu and drag them on top so they are in your favorites, and the moment you log in you can just go from there instead of drilling down and going to that specific transaction screen you want to go to. As a quick example, I'm just going to show you the how we can do the drag and drop into the favorites. So this is data warehousing workbench administration transaction screen. So what I do is I just drag this to my favorites and it's there. So the moment I click on that, it takes me to the data warehousing workbench administration, which is nothing but RSA1. So one other functionality is every every screen you log into, if you go into this small arrow here and click on it, it gives you the transaction code here. So it is RSMon because it went to the monitoring part. But if I just hit /n RSA1, it's going to take me to the modeling screen here. And if you go here, you can see that the transaction is RSA1. So every different screen has a transaction code attached to it. And you can pull that screen up using the transaction code. So as you can see that previously I used /n. That is because I'm already in one screen. I'm already in one transaction screen. So I have to put /n and then another transaction code I want to go to. So if I say RSA2, which is another screen, I have to use /n in front of it. So this is the transaction called RSA2. So if I go here, you can see that that is the transaction here. And if I want to go back to RSA1, I again have to hit /n, which is because I'm already in one transaction screen. But if I want to go to any of the screens from the easy access menu, so the easy access menu can be gotten into by clicking this yellow arrow over there. So from any transaction, if you hit the yellow button on top, which is this one here, it takes you to the SAP Easy Access menu. And from the SAP Easy Access menu, if you want to go to any transaction code, you can simply type in the transaction code. You don't have to type the /n in front of it. So as you can see, it takes me directly to RSA1. But if I'm here and I type RSA2, it doesn't do anything. I have to type /n RSA2. So the other functionality is there's another thing called /o. So if I use /o, it opens the other transaction I want to go to in another screen. So if I say /o RSA1, then I'll have two screens. This screen or this session remains and it opens another session with RSA1. There. So that is the difference between using /n and /o. /n just simply opens it in that transaction screen, whereas /o creates another session and opens the transaction. So there is another button here called create new sessions button. So you can create up to 6 different sessions at one time. So the moment you get to 6 sessions, if you want to create another session, it won't allow you to. So you can be doing, you can do 6 different things at one time in the administrator in SAP Business Warehouse. So that is the importance of that button there. So in this brief tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to create a cube here, as you can see from my screen. So all we're going to do is we're going to create a cube. We're going to create a ODS, okay, and then we're going to extract data from a file. A flat file could be a source system. So we're going to extract data from the flat file and load it into the PSA and the ODS and the cube. So we're going to do it very quickly. I'm not going to do the whole design, but we're going to create some objects in each of it so you get a idea of what needs to be done. So in order to create an infocube, you have to go to RSA1, as I previously mentioned. It's a place where you actually do the administration and modeling. So once you get there, you go to the modeling tab and you have different objects there. You can have favorites, you have your find, data flows, info providers, info objects, and all these things. So what it is if you have to create info objects, this is where you go to create info objects. If you have to create info provider or if you have to maintain info providers, you go here. So an info cube or a DSO or a ODS, whatever it's called in different versions, you call it the info provider. So since I have to create a cube, I go to the info provider tab, and you have all these green diamonds here, diamond like icons here. These are nothing but info areas, so they're mainly used to organize your data. So once you have your own info area, you can actually stack up all your objects in there, but for the tutorial I'm just going to use an info area which is already there. It's very simple to create. All you need to do is go somewhere, go to one of the info areas and just right click on it and say create info area, and then you'll be given a option, or you'll be given a box where you can enter a name for your info area. Usually in companies they ask you to create objects with some kind of naming convention. It could start with a Z or any other naming convention the company goes by. So you can have like a Z test area and actually give the long description. Uh, because of some security reasons, I won't be able to create a info area here. I'll just be creating all my objects in an info area which is already here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this particular info area, and I'm going to right click on it and say create info cube. Okay, so this is how you create an info cube. All you need to do is you need to give a name for your info cube. So let's say I'm going to name my cube Z test cube. Okay, and then give it a long description which could be test cube for demo. Okay, and then it's asking me what kind. See, it's asking me the object type. So it could be an info provider, could be any of these. It could be a data store object. It could be an info cube, it could be a hybrid provider, or all of these. So in our tutorial we will be creating an info cube and a data store object. So what is the difference between these two? The two are very important in a BI design. So the info cube is multidimensional. whereas a data store object is flat. It has rows and columns, whereas the cube has three dimensions, like multi-dimensions based on how you design it. So this is the screen where you go to create the info providers, and because we are creating an info cube, I selected the info cube here, and then it gives me another option where it asks me um, what kind of info provider it is. Is it a standard cube? Is it a real time, or is it a virtual provider? So what is a standard cube? A standard cube is a physical cube which has physical data in it, and the data in that cube need not have real time data. That means it need not have data as it happens. So usually we load a cube overnight, or most probably whenever there is a downtime to the cube's access. So that's why we called it a standard cube. But if you want to design a cube where you want to load real-time data as things happen, as transactions happen, if you want to load that data into the cube, then you would go with the real-time option here. And then a virtual provider is nothing but it is a cube which does not have physical data in it. So it's just a virtual view where it's just a view of the data coming from, you can combine data from different cubes and have a virtual provider, which is also called a multi-provider. Um, so there's no physical data in there. So for our tutorial, we're going to just use the standard InfoCube object and then say create. So once you come to this screen, what you need to do is so you can see that these are the dimensions. So the data package, time, and unit are standard dimensions which need to be there in every cube. And as a part of SAP delivery program, so every cube has these automatically. So as you can see, they're all there, and then you have a dimension 1. So every cube need to have at least one dimension, and then you have the navigational attributes and key figures. So we'll see what they are short. But before getting into all of those, let's just add some dimensions to our cube. So this is the basic design of a cube with data package, time, and unit dimensions. And then we have something called dimension 1 here. And we can name the dimension to whatever our design needs to be. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to add some objects into my dimension. Okay, so for that we have different options here. You can actually call another cube and add the info objects from that cube into your definition, or you can call another data store object, as you can see from the icon here. And once you get all the data store objects, you can actually use the info objects used in those data store objects into your new cube definition. Or what I'm going to do is I'm going to say all info objects. So it's basically going to give me a list of all the info objects present in the system, and I can choose whatever info object I want. So actually what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually first create an info object and then use those info objects in my design. So let's get back here and then go to the info object screen. As I've told you, if I have to create info objects, then I have to go to the info object screen. And once I'm there, see, I've used that info area for my previous project. So I'm going to show you what I did there. So I created that info area, and then I created an info object catalog. So what is an info object catalog? So an info object catalog is nothing but a catalog where you can store your info objects. It is primarily for organizing your objects. Okay, so I have created two info object catalogs, one for the characteristics and one for the key figures. Why is that? Because as you can see, when I said create info object catalog, it's asking me what kind of info objects are you going to store in this catalog. Is it characteristics or key figures? As I've mentioned before about the differences between characteristics and key figures, so based on that, I need to create one catalog for the characteristics and another catalog for the key figures, and that's what I did. So if you see the definition of this catalog here, you see that I have so as you can see that it has only the characteristics folder here, whereas because it's my characteristics info object catalog. If I go to the next one, you can see that it only has a folder for key figures. And the two key figures I defined in that catalog are quantity and revenue. Whereas in the other one, I have product category and material, which are characteristics. So this is how you create a catalog and have info objects in it. Okay. So once you have those, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag these, which are the product category and material and quantity and revenue, into my info object. So for that, I'm going to go to my info providers again, and I'm going to go to the info cube that I have created, which is under, I think it's under, I actually couldn't find the cube, so I went ahead, because we didn't save it, so I actually went ahead and created the same demo cube and saved it. So let's double click that, and once you double click it, it takes me to the display info cube screen. So, but I want to change my cube to add dimensions. So I'm going to hit this small pencil-like icon there. So what it does is it toggles between display and change. So now it's in the display screen. So once I hit it, it takes me to the edit info cube screen. So this is a different screen because what it allows me to do is, this is my cube which we have created, and it allows me to add objects into this definition from any of the other definitions as I've previously mentioned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the object info object catalogs that I have showed previously, and select the info objects from that catalog into my definition. So first let me go to the info object catalog screen, and then I'm going to hit this one, all info areas, and I'm going to find the info object catalog. And as you can see, I've opened a different session, and I'm going to go to that session to get the name of my info object catalog. I've actually already copied it and pasted it into this screen here. So once I hit OK, so it's showing me that this is what it is. So once I go there, it shows me all the info objects under that catalog. So it's the same thing. If I hit a cube and select one cube from the screen like before, like if I hit info cube, it shows me the info cubes in all the info areas. Or I can select a particular info area and look for info cubes only in that info area. So since I hit all info areas, I get all the cubes in the system, and I can select one of the cube, and whatever cube I select, it gives me all the dimensions, the actual design of that cube, and I can actually drag some of the objects from that cube into my present definition. Okay, so as I previously said, I'm going to use my catalog, which is this one, and I'm going to drag the characteristics, material, and product category into my dimension. So first let's what I'm going to do is, first let's drag, all I need to do is drag and drop it under my dimension, and it will be there. So the same with the product category as well. So my dimension 1 has material and product category, and I'm going to save it. So once you see the green icon there, that means that it has been saved successfully. So one other thing I'm going to do is change the description of my dimension. So for that, I need to go into the properties and change the description here. I'm going to name it material. So it's the material dimension. It gives me two other options here. One is called the line item dimension, which is nothing but you're going to have only one characteristic underneath that dimension. So any dimension with only one characteristic. For suppose if my dimension is only going to have a product category or just a material info object underneath that, then it's called a line item dimension. So high cardinality is for performance. If you need performance for the cube, it has other properties too for high cardinality. So based on your requirement, you can select either of those. For mine, I'm just not going to check any of those boxes. But you can see that now I have my cube with one dimension, and it has product category and material to it. So if I want to create another dimension, I can go to the dimensions folder here, and I can say create new dimension. So my other dimension I want to create is customer. And once I say OK, so it's going to have a customer dimension here, and I can pull any of the other info objects into my customer dimension. So once I'm done with this, what I can do is, once I'm done with it, I can save, and then I shouldn't forget to activate it. So unless I activate a cube, it cannot be used in any of my reports, which is why primarily you create a info provider. So once you hit the activate, you're all set. You have created an info cube. So it's the same with the DSO as well. So we'll go ahead and see how to create a DSO. So one other thing I forgot, I'm sorry guys, is that you need to also add key figures to your InfoCube definition. So for that, I'm again going to call the info object catalog I have created previously, and that is this one right here. And once I have the key figures underneath those, I'm going to drag it into my current definition, into the key figures folder. I'm going to drag in both of them. So as you can see, they're here, and now I'm going to take the customer off. I'm going to just delete the customer for now, but I'm going to create it and drag in some objects in there. So once I have this, I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to activate my cube. So as you can see that it's a green button here, which says that activation of the objects with type InfoCube has been successful. So now we have created an InfoCube. So what I'm going to first do is go ahead and see how we can load this InfoCube, and then we can actually go into the query designer and use this cube to run some reports. So this is the data file that I will be loading into the cube that we have just created. So as you can see, we have material, product category, customer, base unit, currency, revenue, and quantity. I've just created this test data for our loads. So I'll be loading this file into our InfoCube definition. So this is the cube that we have created. So all I'm going to do is right click on it and say generate a data flow. So what is a data flow? Data flow is nothing but how data is flowing from the source system, which is our flat file, as you can see from our PowerPoint. So this is where we are, and we're using a non-SAP application, which is a flat file, Excel flat file or Excel file, which I have converted into a CSV, and we're going to load that into the PSA and the InfoCube. I'm going to skip the ODS for now, but it's going to be the same, except that you're going to mention a different target. For an ODS, you would mention the ODS as the target. For the InfoCube, you're going to just mention InfoCube as the target. So let me show you the file that I have created. So this is the file, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this file here, and as you can see, the name of the file is test data 1. So I'm going to go ahead and say generate data flow, and then it gives me this wizard, and I'm going to hit continue. So it's asking me to display what the file name is. So I'm going to select my file here, which is this one right here, and it's automatically going to fill the other details for me. I'm going to hit continue and allow access. The only thing I'm going to change here is, because it's a CSV, I'm going to say that a comma is the data separator, and then hit continue and give permission again. So it's going to map the objects from me from the source field, which is the flat file, to the info object in the info cube. Okay, so everything is fine except that the customer is mapped to a different object, which is material. So I'm going to go ahead and change it. For that, I'm going to hit this radio button here, and I'm going to select customer here and say OK. So it's automatically going to fill in the customer for me. If I hit enter, then the other details are also changed. Then I hit continue and then complete. So once it is done, it automatically extracts data from the flat file to the cube. So let's see what the generate data flow wizard has done. So this is our cube. So if we hit that box there, so we see that it has created a data flow. This is called the PSA. The sign here says it is a PSA. So as per our diagram, so this is PSA, and then we didn't include the ODS, so it's going to be a cube, right? So that's how it is. So from the cube, there is a transformation or a mapping to the PSA, and let's see if there's any data in the PSA. So how can we see that? So we go to this small icon here which says manage PSA, and if we hit, we see that there are no load requests here. See, like everything is blank. So what it did is it just created a skeleton of the data flow from the data file to the PSA to the info cube. As you can see, this is the data flow. Okay, so what we need to do is first we need to create an info package. So there is a difference between an info package and a DTP, which is a data transfer process. So an info package is always used to load data from the outside source systems to the PSA. As you can see from this diagram here, if you want to load data from these external source systems to the PSA, you use a info package. But from then on, if you want to load from the PSA to a ODS or from the ODS to a cube, you always use a data transfer process. So for our thing, we need to create a info package to load the data into the PSA. So for that, I did a right click on it and said create info package. So it's asking me the description. So I'm going to say flat file to test info cube. And then I'm going to select this data source, which is my CSV file name, and say save. So based on that, it gives me a description, like it creates an info package for me. So here is the data selection. So I'm going to first, the test data one is already specified in there, and we go to the processing. So it gives me different options. I'm going to say just load it from the flat file to the PSA, and then it's going to be a full update all the time. And then I'm going to schedule it. So I'm going to say start load immediately. So once I hit start and give permission for extraction, it says data was requested. So how am I going to see what data was requested? So this is the monitor tab here. I'm going to hit monitor, and it's saying that it has extracted 11 records from 11 records. So if you can see my file, it had 11 records. So it has extracted all the 11 records and put it in the PSA. So what is the next step? So it's in the PSA right now, and I'm going to load it from the PSA to the InfoCube. And as I've mentioned before, you use a DTP to do that. So I'm going to go back to my InfoCube administration, and I'm going to hit refresh. So actually sometimes you need to go back and then come back in to see that everything has been populated correctly. So now I can see my info package which has been loaded into the PSA. So my next step is to load data from my PSA to the cube, for which the generate data flow wizard has created a transformation. This is nothing but the mapping from the PSA to the infocube. So we can see that it has mapped material from the flat file to the material info object, product category to the product category. So all the other things that need to be mapped are the base unit um, needs to be mapped to. Oh, it's not allowing me to do it because it's in the display mode. So I'm going to toggle it to the change mode and then map the base unit to my quantity and the currency to the revenue because it needs those fields to make sense out of the amounts and the quantities. So once I've done that, I'm going to activate it. So it says that, some of the source and target field lengths are different. So since it's just a warning, you can ignore it. Since it's a test data, we really don't need to look into that. So once it has been activated, if I go back now, you see now that the transformation is in green color. Before it was in a white color. That means it has not been activated. So we have activated the transformation. So we have data in the PSA. We have the mappings in place to the cube. And we have a DTP here. A DTP here. A DTP folder here. So we need to create a data transfer process to load from the PSA to the cube. So once I hit create DTP, it automatically tells me that the target is the infocube and the source is the data source, which is the PSA here. And the actual data source is PC file test data 102. So when I hit OK, it gives me this DTP where I can manage the data transfer process. So for our thing, it's going to be a full data load. And then based on your requirements, you can always use these options, use these different options. And then I'm going to just go to execute. And the execute button is grayed out because I have not activated it. So once I activate it, I can hit the execute button. So I'm going to execute and it's asking me if I want to see the request monitor. I said yes. And as you can see, the data package has extracted 11 records from the PSA to the cube. Now since we loaded the cube, let's have a look at the data. So for that, I right click on the cube in the administration screen and go to display data. And I'm going to select all characteristics because it's also showing me SIDs. And then I'm going to hit execute twice. And there is the data that we have loaded from the file. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use this data or use this infocube in our query designer and design some reports. So let's look at that. So for that, we need to go into the BEX Query Designer, which is the Business Explorer Query Designer. And I'm going to access that from the Start menu and All Programs and Business Explorer. And you have different tools like the Analyzer, the Query Designer, and the Report Designer, and the Web Application Designer. So we mainly use the Query Designer to design our queries. So let's look at that. So it's asking me for authentication, and once I give it, so let's look at the name of the cube. As you can see, it is Z test cube. So we're going to use that cube we're going to pull up that cube in our query designer. So this is the query designer, and any info provider you open, this is where it's going to show you all the characteristics and key figures in it. And you can actually pull them and put them in one of these areas. So this is the main area where these are the rows in your report. These are the columns in your report. And let's just start and see how it all functions. So I'm going to first say I want to create a query. So it's saying select an info provider. So in my history, there are nothing. So I'm going to go into my info areas, and this is my cube. So I'm going to select our cube. So then it's going to display all my key figures and dimensions in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my rows and columns, and I want to look at all my materials and whatever quantities. I'm also going to drag in the revenue. So as you can see, whatever I place in my rows and columns, I can actually preview them in this window right here. And free characteristics are nothing but, let's say I want to view customers for those materials later on. So I'm going to have it in my free characteristics so that once the report is run and I want to drill down and see which customer bought which material, then I can always pull it up. But in the initial design, it won't be there. So this is how you basically design a query. There's also another tab called filter where you can have restrictions on your characteristics, like let's say customer, and you can right click on it and say restrict the customer, so that your report will be only run for or filtered for those customers. So I'm going to basically say Rocky Mountain Bike. So these are all the customers in the master data, which has been loaded already in the system. So it's just giving me those customers. If I want to restrict them, I can restrict them, or if not, I can just leave it right there. So once I have done designing my query, I go ahead and save it. So I'm going to have a technical name of test underscore test 01. I'm going to use the same thing for my description as well. And once I hit save, it's saved, and it's saying that the query is correct. So if I want to basically run my query to the web, I can use this execute button here, and you can have a look at how it looks like. So it actually opens up the query in the web.
Let's also look at this query, how it renders in the Bex Analyzer. Bex Analyzer is nothing but an Excel version of the report you have created in the Query Designer. So let's go to Bex Analyzer. For that, all you need to do is go into your All Programs and hit the Analyzer under the Business Explorer. I've already done it, and this is the screen it gives me. So I go to Open Query, and then I give my credentials. And it takes me to the query that we have just created. So which is this one right here. So when I open it, it actually displays the results for the query. As you can see, we have material, quantity, and revenue in our description. So that's what it's showing here. And this is like a simple test query. You can have any other definitions as you like. So my main point is that all we have done in today's class is we have loaded data into a cube, into a three-dimensional cube, and we have run reports on it. So that's what we mainly do in business information systems or business warehouse. So based on this tutorial, you must be having a brief understanding of what business warehouse is all about, what we actually do in business warehouse. It's basically used for reporting, and the way we do it is we gather the data from different source systems an organization uses to store their transactions in the different functional areas like sales or finance or inventory, and we just drag or we just take in all that data and put it in a multi-dimensional infocube, and then use the query designer to run reports on it. The report I've showed you is a very basic version. You can basically play with the query designer and use the different free characteristics, filters. There are also several different properties called exceptions. You can put conditions on them. You can have like exceptional reporting. You can have conditional reporting. You can have variables instead of fixed values. So all that can be done in the query designer, and it is very user friendly. So that's about this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.